pressing has become so popular over the last few years, and I think even now, teams, managers, fans in particular are more bothered about what their team does off the ball rather than on the ball. So today we're going to talk about pressing and how to implement it in Football Manager 2022. Let's go. Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel now. Pressing. Now, I must admit, I haven't done too much in terms of working on the real intricate parts of pressing up until the start of FM22 and a couple of tactics videos. If you're not aware, every Thursday there is a tactics video on the channel. We've looked at Rangick and Bielsa over the last couple of weeks. So those in particular have given me different options and problems to try and fix within the game to get the team pressing in the way that I want them to. Now, I've not delved into any of the mechanics of the game and how the under the hood kind of system works in terms of what triggers a press and how all the mechanics of the match engine works to get players to press. I'm literally basing all of this info and content on how I would get a real life team to press and the options available for us in the game to get that done. If you are interested in really diving into the deeper delves of what happens under the hood, as we call it, behind the scenes in the game, then you want to head across to Busternet. He's done a lot of videos on pressing and talks about the match engine and the game itself. However, we're going to look at a couple of little systems that I've set up, how I've done it, why I've done it, what you guys need to consider whatever you are doing, and just a couple of basic little tricks. We're going to start off with our team instruction, sort of like in transition and out of possession, just so you get a good idea of the absolute basics. And then we're going to dive into the key part of pressing in Football Manager, which is the opposition instructions. All right, so first things, a few things that you need to be wary of is what a counter press is. And obviously if you highlight it, it says counter press will ask players to immediately apply pressure after losing possession and hope to recover the ball as quickly as possible. Quite basic. I think a lot of you will click this button. Even if you don't have this selected, it doesn't mean that your players are never going to do a counter press themselves. Other things to consider in out of possession is, number one, your player role of your player. So if it's a defensive player who's got a lot of better attributes in terms of determination, work rate, etc., tackle harder, along with the trigger press, as in something like much more often, so you're asking your team to push more often, then the chances are that player is still going to press regardless of what you've got selected here in when possession has been lost. Now, other things that you need to consider, obviously in the team instructions, is the defensive shape and how your team is going to press. Now, what I would say is, I think generally the go-to, and if you watch any OP tactics, the natural thing is much higher defensive line and much higher line of engagement. Now, for me, I think it's a little bit of an overkill, and what I was trying to recreate with the Manchester United tactic, I just needed it on standard. Now, what that does is it compresses the area of the middle of the pitch. This zone here, in between our defensive line and our line engagement, is a lot tighter, a lot more compact. And like with every system, there's flaws, there's pluses, there's negatives to everything. So what I wanted was with this was that the zone was very compact, so we could get a little bit closer to our opposition, get a little bit tighter, and hunt down often in pairs. How the game kind of works in terms of pressing is each player will have a zone, an area around them that if the ball comes into that area, then they'll go and press. Obviously, small of the space, this probably does mean then that a lot of your player zones will overlap each other, meaning that more than one player will go and press. You'll be able to double up, you'll be able to cause overloads and have a real aggressive press in the process. Now, the back thing of that is that it leaves a lot of space in behind. It requires a lot of energy, a lot of work rate. And then with that, along with that compactness, I've added extra other things in. Now, get stuck in is a personal preference of mine, no matter what tactic I kind of do or what formation I'm playing. I always want to see my players getting stuck in as soon as it beats that line of engagement. Now, a few things for you to consider in touch of the trigger press, because I've got it on much more often. That does mean that players will break out of their formation, out of their shape. It also does mean that even though we've got a standard line of engagement, occasionally, and depending on what kind of player you've got and what role he's in and also the trigger press you've set, players will break out. I've actually got it in my opposition instructions. If we quickly look at my opposition instructions, we never trigger press the goalkeeper. They are the basics in terms of what you need to do in here. Now, the big one is opposition instructions. I have a real clear defined way of how I want the team to press. Basically, this is from my Manchester United save, my DNA save, where I wanted to go into Manchester United, create a pressing tactic with the idea of trying to be realistic. And how would Ralph Rangnick press with Cristiano Ronaldo? No, he's not in my team at the moment. Let's just, for argument's sake, just put him in. Now, my idea behind it was that Ralph Rangnick was going to come in and do the 4-2-2. I have done a video on the 4-2-2. I'll put the link down in the description so you can give that a watch, show how in detail I pressed, and a few videos from how it looks in the match engine. But basically, the idea with this was that we necessarily didn't want Ronaldo to do much of the running. The idea was that we wanted him to be up alongside centre-halves, not pressing, but showing them out wide to the fullbacks. And then once the ball went out to the fullbacks, that's when as a team we would press with our central midfielders, we would press with one of the forwards and then one of the attacking midfielders. We would try and get the ball, we would try and win the ball high up the pitch and then get a few quick vertical passes in and score. Pretty much the Ralph Rangnick way. Now the idea was that we didn't want Ronaldo running around, chasing around. The idea was that we would force the play one side, and then from that, the midfield forward in particular would then burst into life, along potentially with the pressing forward helping out. The idea is that Ronaldo would stay quite central. He would stay down the middle. He would wait for literally the team to win the ball, and then he would come active once we've regained possession of it, and then he'd be in a really good position to score. He would also act as a little bit of a backup in terms of press. If we're pressing a fullback, we want the two forwards to kind of stand alongside the two centre-halves, so it means that they can't necessarily switch the plays comfortably across the pitch. So even though he's not doing the trigger press himself, players can still be useful in terms of marking space, marking players. So in the opposition instructions, this is what I have set up. I do it in positions. I don't do it based on game. I've kind of done it around the fact that there'll be multiple different tactics used in the game. So we've got right midfielders, we've got attacking midfielders in terms of right and left, what to do with a central lone striker, etc. So I'll go through it, I'll explain why I've done it, and hopefully it'll make sense of how then you can set up your own press. So we've got a standard line of engagement. The idea is that I haven't done a trigger press to the goalkeeper. I'm trying to think of, once again, we don't want Ronaldo at the age of 36, 37, even though, to be fair, Football Manager kind of, even though they said you wouldn't be able to do the gegenpress and you'd have to be careful, it's not quite materialised that way just yet. So I could have quite easily just left all this off and let Ronaldo chase around, no problem, but trying to stay a little bit true to the save idea I had and the tactical idea. So we don't want to trigger press the goalkeeper. We're going to let the goalkeeper have the ball. We're going to let him pass the ball out, generally to probably the two centre-halves. We've also done the same here with the centre-halves. Once again, I'm not asking Ronaldo to be heavy pressing, go in and win the ball back. I want him just to drop off. He'll maybe be 5-10 yards off that centre-half. Standing in front of him, forcing the play to go out wide. If you've got two centre-halves, what I'm thinking is if there's a centre-half on the ball here, all I want Ronaldo is to stand there. And all he's basically doing is kind of blocking passing lanes. That will then force the play out wide generally to the fullbacks. And then this is where I wanted my players to kick in. I wanted my right back, as soon as the right back gets the ball, we're looking at trigger pressing, and also the left back. Now, the weakness of our tactic here, and the one that I'm playing more of at the moment, I'm doing more of a diamond, is obviously the wide areas. So we don't want the fullbacks gallivanting forward, allowing them space down the line. Ideally, we want to show them inside. So what I would make sure is do that we're forcing opposition inside, but at the same time, in the opposition instructions, a key thing to kind of focus on is what you want the fullbacks to do. If you're wanting them to, a key thing for this, I think, is to understand what system you're playing and where are your weaknesses. Now, if you're playing a 4-4-2, a standard 4-4-2, you might say your weakness is in the middle of the pitch, because often you'll be coming up against teams that are playing a 4-3-3 or a 4-1-2-1-2 like me. So you may want to force play outside. So what I've done here is I've shown my fullback, my right back, onto his left foot. I haven't shown him onto his weaker foot. I've shown him onto his left foot. On the opposite side, my fullback, I've shown him onto his right foot, even though he's at left back. Now, the reason I've done this is to make sure it forces the play inside. If you can imagine, most players, let's say Cancelo, he's playing at left back. I still want him to go on inside onto his stronger foot, which would be his right foot. I want that because that's where we've got players. We've got an attacking midfielder, we've got two central midfielders, we've got a sitting midfielder. So be careful what you choose in here. Me showing Cancelo as a left back onto his left foot means I'm going to show him down the line. I don't want that, because that's where our space is for the other team to attack. We want Cancelo. If this is Cancelo here, we want him coming inside onto his right foot and coming into where our attacking midfielder would be. Does that make sense? So be careful and try and think about what you clicking here, what's it going to do in the game in terms of what player movement is that going to have. Obviously, if you're looking at weaker foots, yes, the weaker foot would be, a lot of the time, if you think of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, you want him going onto his left foot, don't you? So you want him coming inside as well, because that's where he's going to be loose on the ball. So that's what you need to be aware of, having players from other teams that are comfortable, maybe playing as inverted wing-backs and stuff like that, or players such as Cancelo that are really good on both feet. The next thing I've done is the middle three. So what I'm looking at is a lot of teams will often play a 4-3-3 with a holding midfielder, and what we want is, we're trying to encourage the fullbacks to come inside and then find the deep line playmaker. Now, if you're playing against a really good team, naturally they'll be playing with some player of real quality. At the moment, we're not. But in the other saves I've done, I've been playing with a Regista who's pretty much like a playmaker playing in front of the back four. So you need to be aware of the press. And what I've done in here, as soon as that ball goes into the defensive midfielders, regardless of how many they're playing, some teams will play with a 2. So that's why I've ticked the DMCR and the DMCL, the left and right defensive midfielders, just in case they're playing with them. And I want a trigger press that as well. So as soon as that ball goes in there as well, if it manages to get through, if it's starting at the centre halves and it manages to get through to the defensive midfielders, I then want that trigger press to happen as well. I've also got tight marking. I think that's a good one for winning the ball back. So if you can imagine, this is the opponent's back line. This is my advanced sort of like playmaker, my number 10. I want him in here. I want him stood on his toes. So then when the ball is hopefully forced inside from our press, our trigger press, that then Pedri or whoever's playing as shadow striker is in a position to really close down that defensive midfielder. He's going to have his back to goal. He's going to have 2 of my strikers literally stood in front of him, so he's going to struggle to force backwards, and then it gives us the opportunity. He may then dally on the ball, he may have to take an extra touch, and that's when we press and get the ball back. And then the next thing I've asked is to mark tightly. So what I'm looking at is that we're allowing the ball to go to the fullbacks. As soon as it goes into a fullbacks, we're then pressing. We said our weak areas were the wide areas. My one concern would be if a wide player for the opposing team picked up the ball in these areas here, they managed to beat a quick press, they've managed to bypass maybe 2 or 3 of our players, and they get the opportunity to then run at our defence. Now, ideally, I don't want my 2 defenders to be stood all the way back here and allowing a player to get his head up and travel maybe 10, 20, 30 yards at pace into our attacking third. So what I did do, and I did quite well, once again, I'll link it down in the video description below, I'll show you a couple of examples, is how I did it with my Aston Villa tactic, where I was getting my Lucas Digne and Matty Cash to really press aggressively on the wingers. This meaning that they would then have to play backwards rather than being able to turn and run. So I've done that with my right midfielders. I've done it with my central midfielders. I want that play to be condensed. We're trying to press aggressively. So I'm having my 2 central midfielders. We've kind of got the backup as well because we've got a sitting midfielder. So I want my 2 centre midfielders to be really aggressive and hunting down any sort of like defensive midfielders or sitting midfielders. I've got left and right midfield ticked, and I've also got the attacking, depending if they play with like a standard sort of like 4-3-3 or they may play a 4-5-1, 4-4-2. I've just ticked these as tighter marking to, once again, that I will initiate a better press in terms of having my 2 fullbacks ready for there, stop the opponents, stop the wingers from turning. And then this one's the last one. I think it's a real bugbear in the game for me, is that when you're playing up against a single-man striker and you've got 2 centre-backs back there and no one follows him in and no one tracks him in, it allows that centre-forward to get the ball down and help the team break, or at least alleviate a bit of pressure. So if you're wanting that constant bit of pressure and isolating that centre-half, the one centre-forward, sorry, I've got tighter marking on that as well. I've got tackling harder on as well. Once again, just so that if he drops in that little 5-10 yards, one of my centre-halves should then naturally go in and press and mark and tight and try and wing things, or loose balls up in the air, stop him from being able to get the ball down. Any aerial drills, he should come in then and win. It'll stop that centre-forward being able to have that little bit of time to get the ball down and start a counter-attack. Last little thing, show onto foot. I've also done it with the wide players as well, as you could see, trying to encourage them once again to come into where our bodies are, that central midfield area where we have that overload. All right, there's a lot of info in there. But I hope you've understood some of the basics and the principles behind how I press and what I do. Now, as a rule of thumb, I would always press fullbacks because they're in an isolated position anyway. You kind of can use the touchline as the touchline is support. If you're looking at an options for a defender and midfielder in the centre of pitch, he can play passes left, right, and back and forwards. Left backs, full backs, a little bit more isolated because they're losing half of the pitch. They can only go pretty much one way. If you can then force them where you want them to go, it may be a case of you want to force them out wide. You're playing a standard 4-4-2. They've got an overload in the middle of midfield. You want to force them out wide. So all you would need to do is go into the opposition instructions, show them on player positions, just do the opposite. I would then show him onto the right back onto his right foot, which then should push him down the line. And then you've got your left midfielder, your right midfielder, your two full-backs, then banking up, hopefully doubling up on him and winning the ball back that way. Now, this little clip is just a little way of showing you how it all works in the game. So this was using my 4-2-2 at the start of the series that I did, my Manchester DNA Let's Play. Basically, I just want to show you this very quick little clip. So, as you can see, here are my two central strikers. There's my two 10s. There's my two central midfielders. Okay? As you could see, we said we didn't want to press the goalkeeper. We didn't want to press the centre half. So what they're doing in here is actually blocking passing lanes into these sitting midfielders that Bayern Munich had. He's got limited options. He's maybe got a pass. He's maybe got a pass in there, but once again, because we've got two players in here, it would be a risky pass. So he carries with it. But because even though he's now stepped into our line of engagement, we're not actually pressing it because in the opposition instructions, I've asked our team not to press the centre halves. The ball going to come across, and this is where it all kicks in. This is where the magic kicks in. So remember, I've asked the centre halves, the strikers, not to do anything until that ball goes across to that right back. The ball goes across, and as you can see, Jesse Lingard is on the move, presses aggressively, backed him up. We've now got Cavani and the two central forwards in a really good area. We've stopped that ball probably going back into the centre half a little bit as well. So we've limited the options of what that player, the right back, I think it's Pavard, can do on the ball. And then Jesse Lingard wins it. And it's a perfect example of what probably Ralph Rangick wants to see in his Manchester United side. But that was just a very quick clip just to show you how it can kind of work in the game. You can get little clippets by just setting up some simple pressing traps. Now, that is the opposite instructions done. A couple of things that I would like you to think about though and try and implement is still, SI did say that you're not going to be able to gegenpress for the full game, etc, etc. Now in my Leeds United save and my York City save, when I did the Bielsa video, I had every single outfield position, all these were all trigger pressed because I wanted a constant pressure. I had tighter marking on, I had constant pressure of pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing. Now, are they going to be able to do that for 90 minutes for 60 games a season? Probably yes, but what you'll see is a lot more injuries because your players are going to be low on fitness, their match condition's going to go down, you'll see a lot more injuries. So a way to get around that without having like a 30-man squad, if you're playing at a lower league, so I'm implementing my Bielsa tactic with my York City save in the Vanarama National League, what I'm trying to do is with that is, and I'm being a little bit cuter, so have a tactic on the back burner, just a tactic you can go to that kind of disregards everything. So you would take off pressing. You would take off, maybe get stuck in. You would bring the line back. You would bring that back. You would clear all of the instructions, all of them. You would also look at not counter pressing, and you would have then a really solid defensive unit. You might even click it onto very defensive. I do this a lot. I don't do it as much as I should. I tend to do this. Imagine a game is won, you're maybe 3-4-0 up, you may be even 3 or 4-0 down, and it's just a way of, because Premier League as well still only do 3 substitutes, you've got a big game in midweek. Do I want my team hunting down Southampton, who have just played and smashed 7-2, do I want them going for the full 90 minutes, full throttle? No, we want to be managing the game a little bit better. So these are a few things that I do when I remember, to do them. So drop the defensive line, drop the line of engagement, don't ask them to press. You can slowing the tempo down when they've got the ball, just a way of conserving energy if you've spent best part of maybe 60 minutes doing a really aggressive press. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope that's made sense. It's quite difficult to kind of show you how I've done it during the game without having a fancy tactics board. I need to sort of like dive into like getting one of those online tactic board things to explain how I want the mechanics and how I want my players to react. I'm going to try and do something on no pressing and a really low block and being really boring and compact and seeing what we can achieve by hitting teams on the counter attack. If that's something you would like to see, let me know down in the comments. Thursday's video is all about Roberto Mancini and his Euro 2020 successful 4-3-3 tactic. Very popular. Should be really good. Make sure you go stay tuned. And if you are still here, smash a like on today's video and make sure you're subscribed. Let me know down in the comments if any of this has been useful for you. Go check out Bust the Net as well if you want to really dive into the mechanics of how the game works. And yeah, we'll see you at the next one. Cheers, guys. Take care. See you later.